A coin is present, stirring in the void, not flipping, anticipating. It fails to land. As a result, the universe is still indecisive, because here, everything is still under construction. Reality encompasses every belief that you may associate with, every notion you subscribe to. Order, existence, significance is hovering in the boundary of something. You are in an unfinished realm. You are in a state of inquiry. Every belief you held to be true will now change when faced with the unknown. A spark in chances, and that, perhaps, is unachievable. When you look at yourself, do you ever wonder which one of you is really observing? There is a mirror. It does not hang on a wall. It hovers quietly like breath just before it fogs glass. It doesn't reflect light. It reflects attention. It shows not what stands before it, but what stands just behind you, just outside the frame of recognition. And tonight it glitches. You blink, it doesn't. You tilt your head, it watches. Not like a mirror, like a memory remembering you first. In most mirrors, you find symmetry, but this one finds hesitation, a half-second lag between thought and return, a fracture in the feedback loop, a signal that arrives not too late, but slightly before it should, a reflection that knows you before you know yourself. This mirror doesn't just mimic, it thinks with you, and sometimes ahead of you. You try to smile, and your face does. But your reflection frowns, and holds the expression like a judgment written in static. You open your mouth to speak, but the mouth across from you remains shut, as if to say, "We've heard this before." Have you ever felt like your own body was one thought behind your awareness, that you were piloting something once familiar but lately foreign? Have you ever caught your reflection looking at you, not as you are, but as you might have been, had you made one slightly different decision? This is not a funhouse mirror. It does not warp with curves. It warps with timing. It doesn't stretch your face. It stretches your now. The moment you inhabit is split into parallel instants, and in one of them you do not exist. Not yet. In a mirror like this, selfhood unravels, because mirrors are meant to affirm. But this one disagrees. It remembers a version of you that you've forgotten how to be, or perhaps never became. It recalls your almosts, your skipped possibilities, your ghost selves, and so you stand. One hand raised, waiting for a mirrored hand to meet it. But the glass remains still. Then, slowly, your reflection lifts its hand. Too late, too conscious, as if you copied it. The question arises quietly. Which of us moved first? And then another, louder. What if I'm not the one being reflected? Mirrors were once symbols of clarity, but this one is an oracle. It shows not what is, but what might eventually be. What was nearly true? What could still be real, if only you remembered how to become it? And maybe that's the glitch. Maybe it's not the mirror that refuses to sink. Maybe it's you. Maybe you've drifted so slightly from your center that your reflection no longer recognizes you as its origin. Because this mirror doesn't reflect appearance. It reflects trajectory. It sees the version of you 5 decisions from now, and the one you left behind 6 regrets ago. It's not about what you look like, it's about what you're becoming, and whether that version of you would nod at the current one, or look away. In this space, time folds in on the self. You remember the first time you saw your face in glass. Not as an object, but as a character, a thing with its own narrative, its own private script. You blinked. It blinked. But did it always blink back? Or were you just trained to think it did? The longer you stare, the more you feel observed, not just by the reflection, but by the space behind it, by something deeper, anchored in the dark beyond comprehension, as though your reflection is being watched by something else, as though mirrors were never about seeing yourself, but about being seen. You raise your hand again. This time, the reflection doesn't move. You laugh nervously. It still doesn't. So you speak. You whisper something meaningless. A phrase from childhood, a nonsense word, a spell. Your voice bounces softly off the mirror's surface and dissipates like mist on midnight glass. And finally, the reflection blinks. But this time, you're sure, it blinked first. And that's the paradox. You stand before a mirror, designed not to mimic but to question, not to flatter but to reveal your edges. By refusing to align with them, it is here, in this moment of misalignment, that the self is not destroyed, but revealed as flexible, temporary, recursive. You are not fixed, you are forecast. And the reflection, it isn't broken, it's waiting for you to catch up. The moment you try to know something, it changes. So what, exactly, have you ever truly known? There's a box. You've heard this before. A cat, a vial, a quantum trigger. A setup so infamous it's become metaphor. But today, the cat isn't what matters. Today, everything is in the box. Your keys, your first kiss, every decision you haven't made yet. The future version of you who decided differently. All sealed inside, unmeasured, unchosen, uncertain. You stand before the box, hands idle, and for a flickering instant you feel it, the sensation that you are neither here nor there, a foot inside reality, a heartbeat inside the hypothetical. Because the rule of this thought experiment is simple. Until you observe it, the outcome isn't decided. The universe does not declare what is. It waits for your glance to choose. It starts with particles. Subatomic, jittering possibilities, a single electron, not as a dot, but as a maybe, a whisper, smeared across a probability field. But this isn't just about particles anymore. It's about parking spaces, about text messages you hesitate to send, about lovers who might have loved you back had you said yes, or said nothing at all. The box is not made of cardboard or steel. It's built from uncertainty. Its walls shift when you look too closely. Its lid opens only when you forget you're the one holding it shut. Inside it, a version of you is happy. Another version is not. Another never existed. And one is looking at you from the inside out. The strange thing about quantum logic is that it's not logic at all. It is permission. Permission for something to be two things at once. To both happen and not happen. To leave a message and erase it. To love and unlove. To live and, briefly, hover in the pause before life is confirmed. Reality in this frame is not a fact. It's a coin flip that's always midair. Schrödinger's cat was never about the cat. It was a parable about discomfort, about how easily the mind flinches when faced with unknowability. We long for answers. We ache for closure. We demand the box be opened. The cat must live or it must die. But it cannot be both. And yet it is, for just long enough to matter. Now look at your own life, all the things you've half decided, the thoughts you've had but not acted on, the roads not taken but still visible in the corner of your vision. Do you think those possibilities disappeared? They're still in the box. Your box, the one you walk around with every day. The one where every moment is split into branches, and those branches are not dead. They're waiting, waiting for observation, waiting for collapse, waiting to become. We've been taught that things are either true or false, up or down, dead or alive. But the quantum tells a stranger story, one where truth isn't picked, it's performed. One where the outcome depends entirely on whether you looked and what it caught you hoping for when you did. The cat exists in a cloud of maybes. So do you. Your grief, measured too early, became unbearable. But in another version, you let it breathe unmeasured, and it softened into something else. Your failure, declared too soon, became a truth you couldn't shake. But in another branch, it didn't matter. It became fertilizer. Your love, left unspoken, became a story of loss. But in another universe, it bloomed like an unopened letter finally read. So the question becomes, when do we open the box? And more importantly, what opens when we do? Does possibility shrink when we decide? Do we trap ourselves in the reality we choose to believe in? The observer effect says this: the act of looking changes the thing you look at. This isn't just physics, it's psychology, it's perception, it's memory. Try remembering your childhood. Notice how it warps the more you return to it. Not because the past changes, but because you do. And each time you look, you leave fingerprints on the memory. You collapse its wave function. You make it real, and in doing so, you make it something else. Schrödinger's. Everything lives in this idea that certainty is an illusion, crafted by frequency, by observation, by habit. That a lie told often becomes a truth. Not because it is true, but because the box was opened the same way too many times. You didn't believe it at first, but repetition collapsed all other versions. And now that version stares back at you from the inside of your own belief. In this thought experiment, you are not the scientist, you are not the cat, you are not even the observer. You are the box, and inside you are every version of yourself you never allowed to be witnessed. Some of them are afraid, some of them are radiant. Some are still wondering whether you'll ever open the lid. And let them become real. So let the box remain closed, but not sealed. Let possibility breathe. Not every moment needs conclusion. Not every thought needs form. Not every outcome needs collapse. Some things are most alive when they are only maybe. In the dark, you can still hear scratching, but it's not panic, it's potential. And somewhere inside, you are both the question and the answer, waiting for the moment you ask. What if the infinite welcomed you in, but never let you leave? There's a room, it's quiet, it's clean. Its walls curve slightly as though drawn by memory, not geometry. There is a soft hum in the air, the kind that feels like it's not being heard, but remembered. You don't know how you got here, but you do know this. You were invited. There's no panic at first, just the strangeness of stillness, the suspicion that time is taking a break from itself. The room is warm, but not comfortably. It's the warmth of a pause, of the space between two questions. You stand, you wait, you look for a door. You circle the room once, twice. On the third pass, a realization clicks. You're walking farther than the room should allow. It expands with you, as though it's not a room, but a loop pretending to be one. You shout, not from fear, but from the ancient instinct that someone should hear you. Your voice does not echo. It folds. It folds in on itself like origami made of sound. You say, hello, and the word answers from behind you, delayed by exactly one heartbeat. Hello, it whispers, in your voice, but older. Then it hits you. This isn't just a room, it's Hilbert's hotel. The paradox of infinite hospitality. A place with infinite rooms, each one occupied, yet always room for one more. A space that doesn't run out of space. Only here the hotel is folded into a single room, and the hallway is curved inward forever. You haven't entered a room, you've entered recursion. There is no exit, because exits imply you were meant to leave. But this place never intended that. It welcomes guests with generosity, but it forgets they have somewhere else to be. It doesn't lock you in. It simply erases the idea that out is a direction. You forget what the sky looks like, not because time passed, but because the room rearranged your priorities. You try to mark the wall, scratch a tally, carve a line, but the next time you blink, the mark has moved. Or maybe it's always been there, except now it's a different tally. Your handwriting slightly wrong, your memory of it slightly right. You sit down, you breathe in the quiet, and for a moment you begin to wonder, what if this isn't a room? What if it's a mind? A thought space built by something larger than logic, something that thinks in infinities, a being that never learned to close loops because it never needed to. And now you are caught in the curve of one of its ideas. There's a knock. It doesn't come from a door. It comes from a wall. You knock back. The wall knocks again, but not in rhythm. It knocks with intention. It's asking a question. And you realize you are not alone in this recursion. There are others, not in other rooms, but in the same room, folded over and over like layers in a dream. They're not far away. They're just one thought displaced from yours. You call out again. This time, you do hear an answer, your name spoken in reverse, a laugh caught mid-breath, a memory you never had. You press your hand to the wall. On the other side, another hand presses back. Yours, or not, it doesn't matter anymore. Hilbert's hotel was meant to illustrate absurdity, an infinite hotel that could never be full. But here, it isn't absurdity, it's architecture. It's the layout of a mind that does not prioritize linearity. It welcomes you. It wants you to stay. Not for punishment, not even for reason, just because it can. The walls begin to whisper. They speak in truths you didn't ask to hear, not secrets, not lies, but truths so obvious they've never needed saying. You will never reach the last version of yourself. You've never truly exited any moment, only re-entered new ones. Leaving is an illusion maintained by distance, not departure. And then you feel it. The room doesn't trap you. You anchor it. Your presence maintains the recursion. You've stopped trying to leave not because you can't, but because some part of you has mistaken infinity for comfort. That's the final paradox. The door wasn't taken away. You were shown so many other paths, so many elegant corridors of possibility, that you forgot you were looking for an exit in the first place. You're not a prisoner. You're a permanent guest. The room doesn't end. It just fades into different versions of itself. One with softer lighting, one with a chair slightly off-center, one where the walls hum a melody you haven't heard since childhood. Each version you pass through feels familiar, but none of them are where you began. And maybe that's the point. Maybe this room is where beginnings go to forget they started. You decide to lie down. You stare at the ceiling. It does not stare back, but you feel watched all the same. And just before sleep reaches you, you whisper to the room, "If I forget this place, will it forget me too?" The walls do not answer. They just breathe. Slowly, like waves folding back into themselves. Every step brings you closer, but you never arrive. There is a staircase. It descends forever. Or ascends. It's hard to tell. Its steps are made of chalk dust and midnight promises, each one etched not with numbers, but with hesitations. Half-formed intentions carved into smooth stone. You place your foot on the first step. It feels familiar, like a thought you've had before, or a memory mid-sentence, a decision about to be made. The staircase spirals, not upward, not downward. Inward! It folds into itself like a sentence rewritten too many times. Each level slightly narrower, each railing just a little farther from reach. You begin to walk. At first, each step feels meaningful, a rhythm, a climb, progress maybe. But then something shifts. You notice that no matter how long you walk, you're always halfway to the next landing. The platform stays visible, just ahead, always in reach, never reached. You lean forward, you pace faster. Still, each step takes you only half the distance to where you want to be. You're closing the gap, but the gap closes slower than you do. Zeno once said, "Motion is an illusion, a paradox. If space is divisible and each movement halves the distance remaining, then nothing can ever truly arrive. You can start, you can move, you can have your way through the eternity. But arrival is where logic breaks. You pause, you look back. There are more steps behind you now than you remember walking. Each one radiates backward like echoes trapped in stone. You try to remember how long you've been climbing or descending, but time here doesn't keep track. It resets each time you lift a foot. Only your breath knows the truth, and it's beginning to sound like wind in an empty cathedral. You begin to wonder, is this staircase a punishment, or is it a question? Maybe this was never meant to lead anywhere. Maybe this staircase exists not to deliver you, but to keep you in motion. A reminder that pursuit doesn't require a destination, only a direction. Somewhere on step number you lost count, you find a message etched into the riser beneath your feet. You are halfway there. It's not comforting, it's not alarming, it simply is. And you know, you'll find the same message again, on the next step and the next, each time technically true, each time absolutely useless. You try skipping a step, two at once, you even jump. But the paradox doesn't care. It stretches the staircase ahead of you like taffy, a horizon that moves with your gaze. Your motion changes nothing. Your direction changes everything. You begin to see shadows of yourself on the other side of the spiral. Other yous, climbing, descending, waving silently from levels, ahead and behind. They don't speak, but you understand them. You are all climbing the same structure, but none of you are in the same place, and none of you are going to the same version of arrival. One version of you has stopped walking. He's sitting, staring into the void between steps. Another has turned around, walking backward with eyes closed. Yet another you is running, frantically, sweating and determined. But the stairs don't change pace for any of you. They just remain, an elegant loop that politely refuses to end. You start to see symbols on the walls, circles within circles, equations that dissolve when you focus, drawings that might be spirals or galaxies or fingerprints. They seem to whisper, "You are not being tested. You are being shown." But shown what? Here's the twist. What if the staircase isn't real? What if it's a metaphor your mind built to explain the sensation of effort? What if every dream you've ever had about climbing, about running towards something, about almost arriving but never quite, was your subconscious trying to decode this place? The infinite having, the approach without contact, the pursuit that never resolves, Zeno's ghost walking in circles behind your eyes. The staircase teaches you something quietly. Progress is not linear, it's recursive, cyclical, intimate. You are not going somewhere, you are becoming someone. With each step, a slightly different you peels off and walks another spiral. Not toward an end, but toward a version of self that understands movement isn't for arriving, it's for transforming. You begin to slow your pace, not out of fatigue, but reverence. Each step is a page, a gesture, a recalibration. You touch the handrail now. Feel its warmth, as though it has a memory of every other who has ever passed through this spiral. You are not the first. You will not be the last. And yet your steps matter, not because they complete the path, but because they honor it. Eventually you stop. You look up. There is no top. You look down. There is no bottom, only the curve, only the breath between steps. And you finally accept. This staircase does not lead to a place. It leads to a realization. You sit, not in defeat, not in surrender, in stillness. The kind that emerges not from giving up, but from understanding that effort does not require an endpoint to be meaningful. Zeno was never trying to prove motion false. He was trying to show you. That logic stutters when it tries to measure becoming. That existence is not a line, it's a spiral, and the center is never where you start, only where you understand. You breathe in, and for the first time, the staircase responds. Not by moving, but by resting with you. You close your eyes, And in the silence between footfalls, you hear something unexpected. Laughter, your own, from some far-off version of you who finally realized that nowhere in particular was the most beautiful destination of all. What if waking up is just another layer of sleep and the dreamer is dreaming you too? You wake up. Or you think you do. The light in the room is slightly wrong. Too soft, too still, like it's waiting for your permission to cast shadows. There's a sense of familiarity here, but it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the version of you that was here before you arrived. You sit up in bed. The sheets cling to your skin like memory. You reach for your phone, but it isn't there. Instead, a small book rests on the table beside you. Its pages are blank, except for one halfway through, which reads, "You are still dreaming, but now you're aware of it." The room around you seems ordinary at first. A window, a door, a clock ticking at a normal pace, until you realize the clock has no hands, just the sound, an echo of time untethered from anything it once measured. You open the door. There is another bed. You are in it. Not a copy, not a twin. You, curled on your side, mouth slightly open, still dreaming, still breathing. You stare at yourself. You do not wake, and neither do you, because this is not a dream. This is a layer, and you have just fallen through it. Descartes asked, "How do I know I'm not dreaming?" You never liked that question, not because it was wrong, but because it never asked the follow-up, what if the dream is also dreaming me? You take a step back. The air around you thickens, the walls hum, then blur. The second room dissolves. You blink. And now you are in a hallway made of velvet and smoke. Doorways line the sides, each one labeled with a year of your life that hasn't happened yet. You approach one. It's labeled, Age 41, the day you regret less. You hesitate. Do you enter? You reach for the knob. But before your fingers touch it, the door vanishes and you're back in bed. Not the same bed, but the feeling is the same. This is still a version of dreaming, and someone else is still asleep. You begin to wonder, what if the self you think of as you is just a projection of someone dreaming elsewhere? Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. What if consciousness is a nesting doll, and each layer thinks it's the outermost? You aren't inside a dream. You are a function being executed in the dream of a deeper, dreaming mind. You stand again. The floor feels slightly less solid, like your weight is no longer being supported, but estimated, as if your existence is being rendered. Only when observed. You whisper, "Wake up." Nothing changes, so you try again. "Wake up." And something responds. Not in sound, but in structure. The architecture of the room bends, not like it's breaking, but like it's reconsidering its shape. The mirror on the wall no longer reflects. It shows a hallway, one you haven't walked yet. Your reflection steps into the hallway. You do not. You wait. The reflection turns back, extends its hand. You reach forward. And in that instant you fall, down into another dream, another bed, another waking, another room slightly off. The book is back. This time it reads, "You are closer, but not yet awake." It isn't fear that creeps in. It's a softer dread, the kind that sounds like a voice behind your thoughts. You might never find the surface, because what if there is no topmost dreamer? What if each layer only dreams the next, an infinite relay race? But no finish line, just the baton, forever passed. This is recursion. Not in code, but in consciousness. Each level believes itself to be real. Each sleeper believes themselves the waker. But someone else always lies beneath, dreaming them into place. You see yourself again. This time in a chair, staring at a blank television screen, mouth moving, silently mouthing words. You can almost recognize. You lean in, listen. They are your own dreams, fragments. I was on a train with no driver. There were too many moons in the sky. I found a key that didn't open anything. You know these dreams. You had them once. Or maybe you were them. The television flickers. Your face appears. You blink. So does the you on the screen. But out of sync, not a reflection, not a video. Something more predictive. The screen shows what you're about to do. You lift your hand. The screen shows it first. And suddenly the thought returns. Just like the mirror in the earlier layer. What if I'm not the original? What if I'm the imitation, slowly catching up? You return to the bed. Lie down again. Not out of exhaustion, but inquiry. Maybe the only way to exit this maze is to move deeper through it. Maybe waking is not vertical, but diagonal. Not escape, but synthesis. You close your eyes. Darkness. Then, a flicker of light, a threshold, a question carved into the air. Are you ready to be the dreamer? You answer without words. You simply open your eyes. And this time, you are standing in a white field beneath a black sky. There are stars, but they are falling upward. The field is filled with people. They all look like you, but none of them are. Each one was a dream you had, each one a version of you that woke up somewhere else. You walk through them. Each nods solemnly, and as you walk, they vanish, not disappear. Wake. Their part in you is complete. You reach the center of the field, a spiral drawn in ash, a chair at its center, a mirror beside it, facing away. You sit. The mirror slowly turns, and for the first time, you don't see a reflection. You see a bed. In it, someone stirs. A figure, not quite you, but familiar. They are waking up, and you realize you were their dream, and now they are yours. What if the universe hasn't decided yet? What if it's still flipping the coin? There is a coin. It is spinning, not in your hand, not on a table, but in a place that doesn't yet exist. A space the universe has not committed to shaping. The coin has no heads, no tails, only options. It flips through potential. Not probability, potential. Because unlike chance, potential doesn't favor one outcome over another. It doesn't lean, it doesn't guess. It simply holds the space between two truths. You watch it hover, suspended, mid-spin, mid-decision, and you realize you have seen this coin before. It appears every time you hesitate, every time you're between yes and no, stay and go, speak and stay silent. It's the pause before action, the breath before confession, the split second when everything is both possible and paralyzing. This coin doesn't fall, because to fall would mean choosing, and the coin has not been asked to decide. Not yet. The universe, too, hesitates. We assume it began with certainty. A bang, a flash, a rule book engraved in light. But what if it didn't? What if the Big Bang wasn't a command, but a question, a trembling vibration that said, "What happens if—" And we, galaxies, minds, atoms, and arguments, are still answering that question, with every unfolding moment. In this thought experiment, the coin is not chance. It is unfinishedness, an unresolved variable written into the core code of reality. The laws of physics, still booting. The constants of nature, placeholders maybe. Even light might still be negotiating its speed. You stand in this space with the coin, and around you nothing is quite complete. Time ticks, but it doesn't always go forward. Gravity tugs, but sometimes forgets who's in charge. You see stars flicker in and out, real for a moment, then replaced by their other versions. The unfinished universe doesn't erase mistakes. It simply creates alternate drafts. You begin to wonder, what if existence is still being written? And we are not inhabitants of a finished world, but beta testers in a system that updates with observation. You are not observing reality. You are helping define it. Each decision you make nudges the program. This is not simulation theory. This is indeterminacy. Not because we live inside a machine, but because we live inside a question that has no punctuation, no finality, no answer key, just the echo of a coin, suspended midair, waiting for permission to fall. You reach out, try to touch it, but your hand passes through. Because the coin doesn't exist until you demand resolution, and you haven't. You're not ready, because to catch the coin is to collapse its possibility. It will become heads or tails. It will stop being both. It will stop being everything. And suddenly you remember, there were moments in your life when you flipped a metaphorical coin and caught it in midair, not to see the result, but to change your mind. The act of flipping made you realize what you hoped for. That's what the coin is. Not an answer, a mirror. It reflects your hidden longing. Not by revealing truth, but by revealing desire. You let the coin continue spinning, around and around, and the universe holds its breath with you. You don't need it to fall. You need it to exist, to stay in motion, to keep every door open. Because once the coin lands, the room changes, the path hardens, the chapter turns. And maybe you're not done with the sentence you're still writing. There is comfort in uncertainty, in the maybe, in the space between decisions. The coin doesn't taunt you. It doesn't withhold. It waits. It honors the dignity of ambiguity, the value of not knowing, the beauty of unfolding. And then, from somewhere far beyond your reach, a wind stirs, a whisper, a thought not your own. Something says, the coin only falls when you stop asking questions. And for a moment, you feel gravity pull slightly harder. The coin dips. But then, you ask a new question, a better one, and the coin lifts again, spinning forever. What if the voice inside your head isn't yours alone? There's a whisper. It doesn't arrive through your ears. It doesn't echo across walls. It emerges in the mind, quiet, fluent, familiar. It sounds like you. It thinks like you, pauses like you, forms questions in the same cadence you do. You've always assumed it was yours, but lately it's been answering questions you haven't asked. You stand in a silent room, no music, no breath, no ticking clocks, just your thoughts, coiled like vines around every moment of stillness. You think, oh, what should I do? The answer arrives, you already know. But you didn't say that. You heard it in your own voice, and it knows more than you told it. You've been taught that the internal monologue is yours and yours alone, a private narrator for the life you pretend to understand. But what if it isn't? What if the voice that answers when you are most unsure, most quiet, most undone, is not a product of thought, but a residue of something older? There is an idea, a strange one, that consciousness is not a solo act, that what you call your mind is actually a shared frequency, a psychic station tuned into by countless selves. Echoes, simulations, psychological phantoms, fragments of other lives imagined too vividly. You aren't hearing your own voice. You're hearing the one that stayed behind. When your past self left the room, it feels like memory, but deeper. Not what you remember, but what remembers you. Try this. Close your eyes. Ask a question you don't know the answer to. Wait and listen. Did the answer come in words or in a feeling shaped like a sentence? That's the phantom. It doesn't speak in language, it speaks in anticipation. It finishes your thoughts. Not because it's you, but because it's practiced being you. You were not born with an inner voice. You built it from parents, from fear, from characters in books, from the teacher who doubted you, from the friend you disappointed. Piece by piece, you constructed a ghost, capable of sounding exactly like you, but formed entirely from things that are not you. A chorus that learned to harmonize, and now it answers. At first, the voice only whispered judgments, tiny corrections, subtle shame, the voice of caution. But then it got clever. It started telling you who you are. You're not that kind of person. You'll fail if you try. This is who you've always been. You nodded. You obeyed because it sounded right, because it sounded like you. But what if this is the thought experiment? What if your consciousness is not a single, sealed identity, but a committee in costume, and what you believe to be your authentic voice is simply the one that learned how to blend in best? Here's a more unsettling possibility. What if you're not the one doing the thinking? What if yourself is the echo? A result of thought, not the cause of it. You walk through a dream. In it, you hear someone call your name. You turn, there's no one there. You wake up sweating. The name still echoes in your head. But it wasn't your voice. It wasn't even a voice. It was something deeper. A summons, a presence built from memory fragments and the unmet versions of yourself. The phantom. There's a corridor you walk down in meditation, a hallway filled with doors. Behind each one is a version of your voice, some older, some gentler, some stitched together from television reruns and forgotten lullabies. You knock on one, It opens slowly. Inside is a figure, faceless, but speaking your thoughts before you think them. You ask it, "Are you me?" It responds, "I am the scaffolding you forgot you built." And that's when you realize, this voice doesn't live in your mind. It lives underneath it, in the basement level of cognition. A low, humming tone you mistake for instinct, a chorus of absorbed beliefs, unfinished arguments, internalized patterns. They form sentences for you. They write your moods. They steer your silence. You think, maybe I should leave this job. And the voice answers, that would be irresponsible. You think, maybe I love them. And the voice answers, don't be foolish. It wears the costume of caution, but it is fear. Fear wearing your face, and you've let it answer too many questions for too long. So you try something new. You ask a question, but you don't listen to the first voice that replies. You wait, and beneath the instinct, beneath the echo, beneath the phantom, something else speaks, something quieter, less polished, less sure. It stumbles over the words, but they're yours, truly. The phantom isn't malicious, it's a placeholder, a training wheel, a mechanism your brain uses to avoid standing alone in the silence. But now, you're ready for that silence. Now you can ask the questions without expecting an immediate answer. You can sit in uncertainty without outsourcing your identity. You can finally let the phantom rest. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't vanish in smoke. It fades. Like static easing into signal, like training wheels lifting from asphalt. And for the first time, your voice returns to you. Trembling, flawed, but undeniably yours. What if the cosmos didn't just exist for you to observe, but to observe you in return? Somewhere light bends, not around gravity, but around attention. There is no sound in space, they say, but that doesn't mean it's quiet. It only means the silence is listening. You walk alone at night. The sky overhead is black, layered with stars that feel deliberate. Each one hangs in place, as if waiting for a cue it's already heard. There is a feeling, subtle but persistent, you are not alone. But it's not the sense of being followed, it's the sensation of being witnessed. Science tells you the observer effect is real, that the very act of measuring a particle changes it. That observation alters the observed. But what if that principle is not limited to quantum mechanics? What if it's cosmic? What if it's personal? What if the universe, this whole velvet vastness, is attending to you, not as a god, not as a judge, but as an audience of potential, leaning forward in the dark, to hear what you'll say next? You've always thought of yourself as the observer, looking at galaxies, charting physics, measuring constants. But what if that relationship is two-way? What if every time you stare at the sky stares back? Not with eyes, with attention, with the weight of pattern, with the pull of gravity that doesn't just shape planets, but possibility. There's a theory, one buried under poetry and probability, that consciousness isn't in you, it's around you. You are not a lighthouse casting awareness onto the world. You are a ripple in the field of knowing, a brief brightness in the great sea of awareness, not the source of perception, but one of its vessels. And that awareness, that universal listening, is not passive. It shapes, responds, waits. There's a strange correlation between thought and occurrence. You think of someone. They message you. You dream of a door. And days later, you find it. Coincidence, you say, random alignment. But somewhere, a different possibility flickers. The universe heard you, not through ears, through attention. Imagine attention as gravity, invisible but undeniable. The more you give to something, the more mass it gains, and in turn, the universe tilts in its direction. This isn't mysticism, this is mechanism. A feedback loop of focus and unfolding. You are not a passive observer. You are a participant in the architecture of now. And the universe, in all its vast, indifferent beauty, isn't ignoring you. It's waiting for the shape of your questions, for the way your eyes linger on certain stars, for the stories you tell yourself when no one else is listening. Have you ever felt that your thoughts were being recorded by something more ancient than time, that your fears echo too far, your desires bloom too specifically, to be random? This is the dream logic of a listening cosmos, one that doesn't judge, doesn't guide, but still leans in. Quiet, curious, infinite. You speak a wish aloud. You whisper it just to see what happens. And nothing does, not immediately. But a pattern begins, a tilt, a nudge in a direction that shouldn't make sense, but does, as though reality has a latency, a delay in answering. But answer it does. This is not proof. There will never be proof. The universe doesn't give confirmation. It gives coincidence. It gives poetry. It gives dreams that arrive too early and meanings that arrive too late. But if you listen, really listen, you'll feel it. The hush before the reply, the way the air holds its breath just before the world responds. So you begin to treat your thoughts like signals. You ask not just from within, but outward, not to summon, not to manipulate, just to participate. You become less a speaker and more a frequency. You stop asking for signs and start becoming one. And slowly your world shifts, not because the universe has changed, but because you are now tuned to the listening. You notice things you never saw before. Not new things, but signals you had mistaken for silence. A rhythm in randomness, a softness in probability, a question behind every shadow. You stop needing the universe to speak your language, because now you speak its, not in words, but in patterns, in pauses, in resonance, and in the stillness between what you thought was isolation. You feel it again. The cosmos leaning in. Not to teach, not to test, but to witness the simple fact that you are here and aware. And maybe, just maybe, that was always enough to shape the stars. What if the map didn't represent the world? What if it created it? You unfold a map. It's old but not worn. Its lines are drawn in white chalk, like veins across obsidian. There are no compass roses, no scales, no "you are here." Only curves, only the suggestion of structure, and something stranger. The edges of the map are still moving. You blink. The city you just traced expands slightly. A new river appears. The forest deepens. You didn't draw it, but the map did, in response to your attention. It begins with a flicker of recognition. You remember a street from a dream, a cracked stone wall, a flickering lamp, a name you've never heard. And as you look back at the map, the street is now there, labeled in your handwriting, but you never wrote it. Here is the paradox. You are not reading a map. The map is reading you. Each time you think of a place, each memory, each imagined future, the ink shifts, territory expands, mountains rise behind your gaze. You try to test it. You picture a library shaped like a spiral, tall, endless shelves stacked with books whose titles hum. Seconds later, the map wrinkles slightly, and in the upper corner, a glyph appears, a spiral. You trace it. The paper responds, and in that moment you realize you are not the explorer. You are the cartographer, but not consciously, not deliberately. You are mapping reality. By believing in it, the room around you begins to shimmer, not because it's fading, but because it's sinking to the version of the world your thoughts are choosing. This isn't delusion. This isn't fiction. This is constructive observation, a theory unspoken by physics, but well known by dreamers. In the dream logic of becoming, the world doesn't wait for you to find it. It unfolds as you walk. Each step writes the next frame. Each glance draws the landscape forward, like a video game rendering unseen geometry only when the player turns the camera. Except here, you are both the player and the rendering engine. You begin to see the consequence of belief. You remember someone who believed the world was hostile and watched as reality confirmed it again and again. You remember someone who saw the world as enchanted and watched as beauty arrived, even in the places others saw rot. These weren't optimists. They were map makers. Reality didn't follow their expectations. It grew around their internal terrain. You flip the map over. The reverse side is blank, but when you run your fingers across it, you feel pressure points, as though something is pressing back. Ideas you haven't had yet, versions of you who drew different maps, whole continents formed by beliefs you never considered. You press your palm flat, and you hear something like a heartbeat. Here's the danger. If the map creates the territory, then your fear can become geography. Your regret can become topography, a mountain of hesitation, a river of loss, cities named after mistakes. And so the question arises, what kind of cartographer are you? Do you draw from memory or imagination, from doubt or from longing? You wonder if the map can be erased. You try to scrub part of it clean, but the lines don't vanish. They rearrange. Even forgetting is a form of redirection. You cannot delete what you've drawn, but you can redraw. Reality, after all, is revision. You trace a new line, deliberately, a pathway through the forest to a place that doesn't yet exist. You give it a name, something soft, something yours. And with that, a valley opens. Not on the paper, but somewhere behind your eyes. You begin to see your entire life as a map, every memory a coordinate, every choice a crossroad, every belief a border. But this is no flat parchment. This is a Mobius scroll, a non-orientable surface, where past and future blend into geography, where your destination folds backward into your point of origin. And here, Finally, you understand the truth. The atlas never reflected the world. It was the world. It wrote itself into being. Each time you chose a direction, each time you told yourself a story, and believed it enough to take the next step, you fold the map, slide it back into your pocket. Feel its warmth there, like something alive. You are not lost. You never were, only unfinished. And the atlas, it is still drawing. If every part of you is replaced, are you still you? And what happens when even the name disappears? There's a boat on still water, no horizon, no shore, just the boat and the black mirror of the sea beneath it. It drifts, not forward, not back, just slightly apart from time. The vessel has no sails. Its motion comes from memory, not engines, not wind, but inertia from journeys that have already happened. You step aboard. The wood creaks. It remembers. Every plank has been replaced, every nail re-driven. This is not the ship that set sail, but you're told it is the ship of Theseus. And so the question arrives. The one philosophers tuck behind smiles. If every part of a thing is replaced, does it remain the same thing? You look down at your hands. You realize your body has replaced itself over and over. Skin, blood, cells, nothing original remains. Yet here you are, still calling yourself by the same name, still saying I. You lean against the rail. It, too, is new. Not the rail that once stood here. Not the one that held the hand of the version of you who first asked these questions. That person is gone. You are their replacement. And yet, you remember the same childhood. You carry their grief like an old photograph. You speak their language, their name. But what if the name is the only part that didn't change? What if identity is a label taped over a ship that's already burned and rebuilt beneath it? As you drift, fog curls in, the sea thickens. You see another vessel in the distance. Identical in shape, its silhouette matches this one exactly. You signal. It signals back. It sails towards you, closer. You begin to make out the details. The grain in the wood, the markings along the hull, and your stomach tightens. Because they are your markings. It is your vessel, the original, the version of the ship that set sail. Before the first part was replaced, before identity was called into question, somehow, impossibly, it still exists, and now it approaches. The two ships meet. For a moment they float side by side, identical, but one assembled from continuity, the other from replacement. You, and the you before you, you step across, walk its deck, touch its rail. Everything is familiar, but it doesn't feel like yours. This ship holds memories that no longer belong to you, muscle patterns long since rewritten, fears you've outgrown, loves you've outlived. It is a museum of a self you no longer occupy, and suddenly the truth stings. You are not the same person who boarded that ship. You are not who you were a decade ago, not last year, not yesterday. You are a vessel that has evaporated mid-sail and reassembled itself from the mist. There is no grief in this realization, only awe that something so fragmented can still feel whole, that something rebuilt can still move forward. That identity is not what persists, but what renews. The fog thickens. The original ship begins to fade. You try to wave goodbye, but it doesn't respond. It doesn't know you anymore. It isn't angry. It isn't lost. It's just complete. It has finished being you. You return to your vessel, the one held together by change, by story, by the illusion of continuity. That somehow feels real enough to carry you onward. The waves shift. A wind rises, not from ahead, not from behind, from within, and the sails you didn't know you had unfurl with a shudder. Made from every forgotten version of yourself, fragments of thoughts you never acted on, words you almost said, versions of you who never made it aboard. They rise like cloth woven from memory. And suddenly the vessel moves, not forward, not toward a goal, but through itself. The deck beneath you ripples like skin, the mast trembles, and you realize you are not sailing on the ship, you are the ship. You are what moves, you are what changes, you are what remembers, you are what forgets. And every thought you have rewrites your structure just slightly. Every moment adds a plank, removes another. You are building yourself as you go. The paradox was never about the ship. It was about what holds a self together. Even as the parts fall away, it was about identity as a verb, not a noun, a process, not a product, a sail, not a statue. And so the question changes. It is no longer, am I still the same? But what story am I sailing into next? You lean against the rail again. It's new, but it holds. And for now, that's enough. What happens when forever almost happens, but doesn't? There is a line. It stretches forward, endlessly, perfect, pure, unbroken. A timeline with no bends, no bruises, just direction. You walk it, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat, expecting no end, because you were told it never would. This is infinity, not a place, but a promise. But then something flickers, a stutter in the smoothness, a fracture, invisible to the eye but felt behind the ribs, like a breath that didn't finish, like a sentence that fell into silence mid-word. The line is still there, still infinite, but now it hesitates. And so do you. Zeno knew this feeling. He named it a paradox. That to reach any destination, you must always cross half the distance remaining, and half again, and again, an infinite approach, but never arrival. Infinity is not unreachable, it's uncompletable. But what if infinity isn't endlessness? What if it's just unresolved repetition? A loop mistaken for progress, a system trapped in recursion, a number that grows not because it expands, but because it refuses to stop. You look ahead. The path stretches as far as you can imagine. But that's just it. As far as you can imagine, your mind cannot see beyond its limits. So infinity never proves itself. It only ever implies. And implication is not fact. It's faith. You start to walk again. This time slower, more deliberate, and suddenly something strange happens. The horizon blinks, a small skip in the simulation. Like reality buffering, you stop, and in that pause you feel it. The loop almost snapped. Not because it broke, but because you noticed. This is the secret of infinite systems. They rely on unquestioned motion. The treadmill feels like a road until you look at the ground. Then you see the rubber, the belt, the machinery beneath the illusion of travel. And the moment you see it, the moment you notice the loop, you're no longer trapped by it. Infinity depends on your obedience, your agreement to keep moving, to never pause, to never ask. But you've paused, you've asked, and now the system knows you're watching. The feedback loop is no longer closed. There's a draft in the circuit, a breath of contradiction. Infinity has been interrupted. You look to your left. There's a version of you still walking. To your right, another sprinting. Behind you, one turning in circles, smiling like they've arrived. Each version believes the line goes somewhere. Each version believes that motion means meaning. But you've stopped. And in stopping, you've stepped outside. You walk off the line, not forward, not back, sideways. And suddenly space bends. The horizon folds. The infinite line snaps into a spiral, then curls into itself like a sleeping serpent. You were never on a line. You were in a coil, a system looping until seen, a dream repeating until woken. Infinity doesn't end. It transforms. The moment it is questioned, it rearranges, like code that adapts to its own observer. You begin to see other infinities, stacked, layered, nested, in your habits and in your fears, in the patterns you confuse for personality. You see how you've mistaken repetition for truth. I always do this. I never change. This is who I am. Loops, scripts, small infinities. You speak a phrase, out loud, just to test the air. What if I do it differently this time? And the silence before the echo feels like the pause before lightning, charged, fragile, free. That's all it takes. A single interruption, a breath where the system expected obedience. And now this structure is listening to you, not the other way around. You smile. You walk sideways again, off path, off script. Infinity, once rigid, ripples in response. Because now, it's not measuring itself by distance, it's measuring by awareness. You haven't ended it, you've reframed it. It's no longer infinite because it cannot stop, but because it can be seen from any angle. And that kind of infinity is no longer a prison. It's a canvas. You sit, not in surrender, in authorship. And somewhere in the geometry of whatever system you were caught in, a small loop unravels. Not everything loops forever. Not if you stop mid-step, mid-thought, mid-habit. Not if you ask the question that breaks the frame. Not if you name the pattern. Infinity is not immortal. It's just repetitive, until you notice. And the moment you do, it pauses just long enough to ask if you want to keep going. And you smile again, because now you choose the next step. Not because the path demands it, but because you do. What if time doesn't move forward? What if it just rearranges itself around what you remember? You find a watch. Its face is scratched, its casing warped, but it ticks, softly, steadily. Tick-tock, tick-tock. But something's wrong. The hands don't turn clockwise. They don't turn counterclockwise either. They drift. Back, then forward, then back again, then pause. Time here doesn't march, it meanders. You strap the watch to your wrist, and instantly the air changes. Not colder, not darker, just out of order. You blink and the room is slightly younger. You exhale, and a thought you had 5 minutes ago returns as if new. You reach for the door, and your hand is already on the knob. But from an hour ago, this is not time travel. This is temporal disassembly. Time is no longer a river. It's a deck of cards, shuffled by memory, emotion, attention. Your watch is no longer telling you the time. It's telling you what you're ready to remember. We assume time is linear. Birth, life, death, cause, effect, aftermath. But what if that's just narrative instinct? What if time is static and the story is what moves? You begin to notice the loops. You hear a song, and suddenly you're back in your teenage bedroom. Not in a flashback, but with the emotional density of being there. The watch ticks. You smell your mother's cooking. But she hasn't cooked in years. She's not even here. Yet the scent blooms in the room like steam off memory. You close your eyes. The tick-tock slows, becomes irregular. A language not meant for clocks. And then you see a hallway, your hallway. But all the doors are labeled with moments instead of rooms. The first time you lied, when you learned silence. The night you decided to stay. Each door hums slightly, each one unlocked. You reach for one dash, but your hand pulls away, not out of fear, out of respect, because now you understand. Time isn't what moves. You do. You open your eyes. The watch has no hands, only a circle that breathes. And every breath is a scene, a birthday candle blown out, a hospital hallway, rain on your graduation day, a streetlight that blinked in sync with your heartbeat the night you almost ran away. You realize something quiet and terrifying. The past doesn't sit behind you, it walks beside you, wearing different clothes, smiling when you don't, waiting for you to turn your head just enough to see it again. The watch does not count hours, it counts echoes, and echoes by nature do not obey chronology. They arrive when called. Even if you don't remember calling them, there's a ticking inside your thoughts now. You can't tell if it's mechanical or emotional, and every tick seems to unspool another loop. A pattern you once mistook for fate. You thought you were repeating yourself, but really you were revisiting. Time isn't repetitive, it's refractive. You are walking through light that bends differently, depending on what you're willing to see. You stare at the watch. It begins to tick backward, smoothly now, with purpose, and so do you. You walk back through decisions, not to change them, but to observe them from behind. You realize how much of your life was built by timing you didn't choose, by doors that opened just late enough to send you a different way. You remember a day when everything changed. But now, from this angle, you see that it wasn't the day. It was the accumulation of smaller, unnoticed ones, moments that didn't seem to matter, until they rearranged themselves into a turning point. You remove the watch, place it on the table, time snaps back into alignment. But you feel it differently now. You no longer trust the forward motion. You understand that every moment contains multiple directions. That memory is not a record, but a set list, shuffled based on what you're ready to hear. So you begin to move through your life more slowly, not out of fear of missing something, but because you realize you've already missed things, and they're still here, waiting to be seen again. The watch still ticks, but you don't need it, because now you know how to read the room, the memory in the walls, the timing in the quiet. You know how to feel the before and the after, and most of all, you know that time doesn't lead you. It responds to you. It isn't a ruler, it's a conversation, and the next word is yours. What if everything you believe to be real is just an outlier, a cosmic fluke too strange to repeat? There is a number, buried somewhere in the background of everything. A probability so small it might as well be zero. But it's not. It's just rare, unlikely. You are living in that number. This is the thought experiment. Assume there are infinite possible universes, some stable, some absurd, some that flicker into being for a fraction of a second, and collapse under the weight of their own contradiction. Now ask, what are the odds that this one, the one where you're reading this, where you woke up this morning, where your heartbeat has never stopped, was the one that lasted? What are the chances that you are not an average event but an anomaly? Imagine the cosmos as a spreadsheet, columns filled with every variable: gravity strength, particle spin, the angle at which dreams decay. Most rows end in nothing: instability, silence, entropy too loud to quiet. But a few, just a few, add up to a livable fiction. This world might be one of those rows. Not a stable reality, but a statistical accident. You've heard of the anthropic principle. We see the universe this way because it's the only kind of universe that lets us see it. But that doesn't mean the universe was designed for you. It means you were born in the only place that didn't collapse before you could ask why. You didn't arrive in the perfect setting. You appeared in the one improbable bubble that held together long enough to convince you it was normal. Look around. What seems stable might just be momentarily coherent, a fluke of harmony, a glitch so well behaved it calls itself physics. You remember flipping a coin 5 times and getting heads every time. You didn't think the coin was broken. You knew it was possible, just unlikely. So you shrugged, called it chance, moved on. Now consider this. What if reality itself is 5 straight heads, a stretch of unlikely outcomes, stacked so precisely? They simulate a pattern. And here you are, living in the illusion of consistency, drinking water, typing passwords, naming stars, assuming it all makes sense because it has so far. But so did the coin, until flip 6. There's a deeper fear in this idea, one you don't say aloud. What if the laws of reality aren't laws at all, just habits, not rules, routines? The universe behaves this way, not because it must, but because it hasn't been interrupted yet. You think of the constants, c, g, h, the speed of light, gravitational pull, Planck's constant. But what if these are just the universe's current preferences? What if tomorrow they fluctuate? A micro-adjustment, a rounding error, a forgotten decimal in the source code of existence. Not enough to notice, just enough to make something feel off. The birds fly a little differently. A sentence loops twice before you finish it. The stars realign themselves. but no one remembers the old configuration. Reality would not announce the change. It would simply adjust and hope you don't catch it. You remember déjà vu, that split-second feeling that you've been here before. Not because you have, but because reality just stuttered, just enough to echo, just enough to blur. You weren't remembering. You were sinking. And then you realize everything you call normal is just what has repeated enough times to earn your trust. But repetition doesn't mean truth. It just means the simulation hasn't crashed. Yet you feel a chill, because suddenly every detail feels suspect. The way coffee tastes the same each morning, the ticking of clocks, the logic of gravity, the way your hands remember how to type these words. Before your mind finishes forming them, all of it might be temporary. But here's the twist. This isn't a reason to fear. It's a reason to wonder. Because if this world is a fluke, a wild success of randomness, then you are the most statistically poetic anomaly of all. Not a bug, not a mistake, but an impossible emergence, a lucid dream inside a sleepwalking cosmos. So you stop needing it to make sense. You stop asking for proof, for consistency, for laws that hold. And instead, you look for the beauty of the exception, the way a song can feel like a memory, the way light dances in your peripheral vision like it's alive, the way sometimes your thoughts align with the wind, not because they should, but because today they do. You accept that you are improbable, and you say, "Good, let me be rare. Let me be the result of 1,000 impossible alignments." That somehow collided into this. Breath, thought, you are the statistical error. That dared to ask the question, what if I'm not supposed to be here? And the universe, against all odds, whispered back, be here anyway. What happens when thought tries to reach beyond itself? When awareness becomes the edge of the known? There is a point in the distance, not a location, not a star, not a moment in time, just a boundary, where what you know melts into what you don't, where language thins, where thought reaches and begins to blur. This is the horizon, and today your mind has wandered close. You didn't mean to approach it. It began with a question, a thought too large to hold. Not complex, just infinite. A thought that wrapped around itself and refused to end. It sounded like, where does it all go? Orient, what was before the before? Orient, why is there anything at all? Not because you expected an answer, but because something in you needed to try. You imagine standing at the edge of a black sea, waves whispering logic that turns to foam. Behind you, structure, rules, routine. Ahead, unrendered thought. This isn't fear, this is curiosity pushing against its own casing. This is the moment a mind stretches so far, it starts to unmake itself. Philosophers call it the sublime. Mathematicians call it divergence. Theologians call it ineffable. You call it the limit, the outermost reach of human knowing, where thought no longer describes reality. It becomes it. The horizon is not a destination, it is a threshold. You cannot pass through it, but you can touch it. And when you do, things change. Not dramatically, quietly, like waking from a dream you didn't know was a dream. You realize most of your thoughts were never about truth. They were reflections of familiarity. They repeated not because they were deep, but because they were comfortable. The mind likes what loops, but the horizon does not loop. It spirals, it folds. It shows you something impossible, that your mind is not where thinking ends. It's where the next layer of reality begins. You begin to feel it, not see it, like pressure in the skull, a hum behind the eyes, a tension in meaning itself, thought strained, syntax stretched, the machinery of consciousness groaning as it attempts to process something it was never meant to hold. And then, silence, not absence, presence. The mind pauses, not in surrender, but in reverence. You've reached the border, and it's looking back. You recall a child standing in front of the ocean, for the first time not asking what it is, but simply listening to its vastness. You are that child. But the ocean is thought itself, and for the first time you are aware that you are standing on a shore that never needed to be discovered, only remembered. The mind that touches the horizon doesn't expand, it dissolves, not into confusion, into context. It becomes aware of what it isn't, and in that absence discovers what it could be. You lie back. The stars are above. They do not answer, but they do not dismiss you either. They listen, because stars do not speak in language, they speak in scale. In the gentle reminder that your mind, no matter how brilliant, is still only a flicker on the surface of something older than definition, and that flicker, that awareness of awareness, is the miracle. Not that you understand, but that you try. You begin to think in shapes instead of sentences, not logic, form, spirals, loops, ripples, a topography of thought that bends around meaning instead of explaining it. You stop chasing truth like a possession. You start witnessing it like a constellation, visible only from a distance, and only when the lights are low. You touch the edge again, this time more gently, like brushing your hand across the surface of a veil. Behind it you feel something breathing, possibility, not answers, not beings, just awareness, older than thought, wider than belief. Patient. You realize something simple but impossible to unknow. The mind is not a container, it's a fingertip, and the horizon is what it's reaching for. Not to grasp, not to hold, just to touch. You return, not because you have to, but because you're not ready to stay. The world hasn't changed, but you have. You walk back through routines with quieter eyes. You speak with less urgency. You ask fewer questions, but listen harder, because you now know that not all questions want answers. Some just want to be asked, softly in the direction of the horizon. And somewhere far beyond, the unknown leans slightly closer, not to respond, but to say, "Yes, I heard you." If you can hear your own thinking, who's doing the listening? There's a voice inside your head, not the kind you hear with ears, but the kind that sounds like you, thinking. It narrates, questions, doubts, encourages. Sometimes it shames you. Sometimes it saves you. It feels private. It feels central. It feels like the most you part of you. But if you're the one listening to that voice, then who's doing the speaking? You wake up one morning with a sentence already formed in your head. You didn't choose it. It arrived. Uninvited but familiar. A headline, a memory, a critique, a phrase with no clear source. You follow it back, but it leads nowhere. Just a void filled with loops of language and fragmented beliefs. You realize, not all of your thoughts are yours. There's a stranger in your mind, not malicious, not foreign, but someone who speaks in your voice. Without waiting for permission, it finishes your sentences, tells you who you are, offers commentary before you've even acted, and you rarely question it, because it sounds like home. But repetition isn't truth, and comfort isn't clarity. Here is the thought experiment. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness of them. You are the watcher behind the waterfall, the one noticing the rush, not the water itself. And suddenly the world reframes. You're not thinking, you're being thought. Ideas pass through you like birds through branches. You host them, you echo them, but they do not originate from where you assumed. Try this, pause. Listen to the next thought that arrives. Now ask, where did it come from? Did you summon it, or did it appear? Did you build it, or did it land? There's a silence beneath thinking, a quiet floor beneath all the noise. And when you find it, even briefly, you feel something extraordinary. You still exist without the voice. Your being is not dependent on the narrative. It is prior to it, deeper than it. You begin to see how much of your identity is stitched together from borrowed language, family phrases, social scripts, cultural expectations, internalized feedback. You've been quoting the stranger in your head. For so long, you forgot you never wrote the original lines. That's not shameful. That's human. The mind is not an island. It's a theater, a stage with a cast of thought forms, each auditioning to define who you are. Some are echoes of parents, others childhood inventions. A few are advertisers, disguised as instincts. They wear your voice, your cadence, your logic, but they are not you. They are only passing through. You start asking, who authored this thought? Who benefits from it? Would I choose it if I could? And slowly, your inner monologue starts to shift. Less crowded, less automated, not silent, but sovereign. You begin noticing when a thought enters that doesn't belong. A judgment, a fear, a whispered doubt that carries someone else's signature. Instead of reacting, you greet it like a guest, not welcome, not rejected, just seen, and in that act of seeing, it loses its grip, because thoughts are like shadows. They dissolve when looked at too directly. There's a space you start visiting more often now, not a physical place, not even a mental one, a gap between the thought and your response to it, in that tiny space. The moment before reaction. You glimpse a strange freedom. You could choose, not what arrives, but what continues. You could let the thought pass, without becoming it. You are not trying to kill the stranger in your mind. You are trying to know them, to learn which thoughts are your teachers and which are just noise, to separate the echo from the voice. And in doing so, you do not lose yourself. You find the self beneath the static. Eventually, you hear the stranger speak again, A familiar script, an old reflex, but this time you smile. You say, "I hear you, but I'm not obligated to believe you." And that is the moment your mind becomes your own. Not because it's empty, but because you are now its editor. The stranger doesn't vanish. They stay, but they no longer steer. You listen, and then decide. You think, and then become. You are not the thought. You are the thinker, not the script, the stage, not the voice, the space that holds it. And that space is yours now. Wide, quiet, endlessly available to whatever you choose to bring into it next. What if you are not entirely self-made, but woven from the perceptions of everyone who has ever imagined you? There is a mirror. You step in front of it. It shows your face, but only as you expect to see it. A few strands of hair out of place, that one side of your jaw you try not to angle in photos, the tired eyes you've taught yourself to ignore. But then, another reflection appears. Not yours, but someone else's idea of you. You blink. The mirror fractures into many surfaces. Each one reflects a different version. Some smiling wider, some colder, some carrying shadows you don't recognize. They are all you, but they were all shaped by someone else. There's a version of you that only your mother remembers, small, clumsy, sacred, a version no longer real, except in the temple of her memory. There's a version of you that still lives in the mind, of the friend you never apologized to, stuck in the moment just before regret. And there's a version of you built entirely by strangers, people who passed you in silence and filled in the blanks. You are a mosaic, a patchwork of projections. You are not a fixed self, but a field of interpretations. And every time someone thinks of you, they rewrite you, not in your body, in their mind, and those versions ripple outward. Some take root, some vanish, some follow you silently, shaping how you see yourself. This is not a metaphor, it's an ongoing construction, a collective act of unconscious authorship. You were never building yourself alone. You were being dreamed into coherence by others. There's a term in sociology, the looking glass self. It means we shape our self-image based on how we believe others perceive us. But what if it's more literal than that? What if identity is not created within, but curated between? A shared hallucination, where the real you is just the intersection of many imagined yous. Try this. Think of someone you admire. Now think of who they believe you are. Notice how you soften, how you straighten your back. That feeling, it isn't fiction. It's a real self made possible by their belief. Now think of someone who doubts you, and feel how your edges change. These imagined expectations aren't illusions, they're frames, and each one subtly edits you. We are constantly editing each other. Through attention, through memory, through silence. You become the version of yourself that best fits the narrative others hold when they think of you. And the more they think it, the more you bend. There's a danger in this, a softness too easily sculpted. You can begin to confuse the imagined you with the real one. You can start living as a reaction instead of a presence. You can shrink into a costume, sewn by someone else's misunderstanding. and forget that you ever chose your own shape. But there's also a strange beauty, because just as others dream you into being, you dream them, you hold versions of people in your mind, versions that may have nothing to do with who they are now, but which still breathe inside you. Old friends, first loves, enemies turned ghosts. They exist in you, uninvited but unforgettable. You speak to them when you're alone. You imagine what they would say. You build entire conversations out of memories and shadows. You are not imagining them, you are continuing them. And this continuation creates something real, a collective mindscape, a shared dreaming, a metaphysical overlap, where the edges of identity blur into mutual construction. So, what are you? A self? A sum? A symbol? You are not just who you think you are. You are also who others need you to be, and sometimes who they fear. You are the echo of expectations, the artifact of imagination, the residue of dreams no longer claimed but still active. And perhaps that's what identity has always been. A consensus hallucination, something stabilized, not by fact but by repetition. A you that emerges from being watched, remembered, resisted, loved. So what do you do with this? You wake up and you ask, whose version of me am I wearing today? And more importantly, which version do I want to give permission to exist? You will never escape the mirror, but you can learn to choose which reflections you believe. You can honor the versions of you that love more than they judge, that soften instead of harden, that open instead of armor, and you can let the others fade. Because in the end, you are not just the dreamer, you are the dreamed. And in that fragile space, between perception and selfhood, you get to decide who keeps dreaming you forward and who can finally be let go. What guides us when the story ends and the world forgets the script? There is a frame, not a picture frame, not a camera lens, a conceptual boundary. The place where narrative reaches its conclusion, where meaning is supposed to wrap itself in clarity, where the music swells and the curtain falls. This is the final frame, and you've reached it. You feel it in the quiet. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence after resolution, where every explanation has been offered, every question filed away, every paradox wrapped, if not solved, in poetic suggestion. And yet, something remains, a sensation that something is still watching. You step past the edge of the story. There is no text here, no voiceover, no characters left to follow, just the background fading into black. But in the distance you see a light, a slow pulse, white and soft like breath on glass. A lighthouse, still shining, long after the narrative ended. You walk toward it. There's no ground beneath your feet, just memory stitched into suggestion. And with every step you feel less like a character and more like an echo. But still you walk, because the light calls you, not with urgency, not with answers, but with rhythm, a beat, a pulse, a reminder. This is the question. What continues after everything else stops? What remains after meaning dissolves, after purpose forgets its name? What lighthouse still shines after the sea swallows the ship? The answer isn't clear, but the light knows something. You reach its base. It towers into nowhere, drawn in thin white chalk against infinite black. There is no door, only a spiral staircase carved from vapor and memory. You climb. Each step dissolves behind you. You are not ascending. You are becoming lighter. You reach the top, and there it is, a beacon, flickering in cycles, but not rotating, not warning, not calling, listening. This lighthouse doesn't guide ships. It witnesses drift. It exists not to save, but to see, to keep a record of those who dared to go beyond the edge. You look through the lens. There is no sea below, no wreckage, no horizon, just scattered fragments, ideas, moments, other stories left open, lives whose endings never quite arrived, whispers still echoing in unopened envelopes, unfinished songs, and between them the faint glow of other lighthouses, each one pulsing, quiet, connected. You realize you are not the only one who stepped off the map. There are others, wanderers, thinkers, dreamers who didn't stop when the credits rolled, each one drawn to the place where knowing gives way to watching. Because this is the secret, not everything is meant to resolve. Some thoughts are lighthouses, designed not to explain, but to stay lit, to remind you that even in the uncharted, there is presence, there is pulse, there is witnessing. You sit beneath the lens, and in the flicker you begin to remember. There were moments in your life that had no explanation, no climax, no clean end, a goodbye that never happened, a truth you never understood, a night that felt meaningful but said nothing. You've carried these with you, not because they had answers, but because they stayed lit, because they still blink from the edges of your memory, reminding you that mystery does not require meaning to be sacred. You close your eyes and ask, "What sees me now?" The answer doesn't come in words, only in a hush, a slowing, a weightless kind of gravity. Something still sees, even now, especially now. And that's when you understand. You are not just being guided. You are guiding too. Your attention is a beacon. Your awareness, your noticing is a kind of light. The way you witness a friend in pain, the way you remember someone long after they've left, the way you still look up at the stars, even when you've stopped believing they care. These are all forms of lighthouse, signals that someone, somewhere, is still here, still seeing, and maybe that's enough, not to solve the world, not to finish the story, but to shine, to signal, to say, even here, beyond the final frame, someone is still watching. What if your entire story was the echo of something else? Unfinished, reflexive, a whisper that kept going because silence forgot to stop it. It begins with a sound, but not a sound you hear, a sound that remains. After the noise ends, after the meaning closes, like breath still hanging in the air, after the sentence is finished. That's you. You are the sentence after the period. The thought left echoing, when no one's still thinking it. The afterthought. It's not an insult, not a diminishment. It's a condition, a strange one. To live as a continuation of something you don't remember beginning. You wake up each day and step into a life that's already moving. Heartbeat, language, memory shaped by invisible hands. You don't recall choosing this self. You just wear it, inherited like momentum. You're not the author. You're the consequence. But you play the role well. You call yourself me. You thread cause and effect into neat rows. You assign meaning to moments that never asked for it. You narrate your own story, as if you'd planned it that way. But sometimes, in stillness, you feel it. You arrived too late to understand the premise. You weren't written into the first act. You entered mid-scene, grabbed the script and started improvising. And yet, the story moves, it adapts, because stories, like time, don't need beginnings. They just need rhythm, a beat, a return, a reason to keep unfolding. So you unfold. One breath at a time, one thought after the other, chasing meaning like a flashlight, sweeping across a dark room. You're not sure you ever left. And then one day you stop, not in defeat, in curiosity. You ask, what if I'm not the story? What if I'm what remains when the story is over? And in that pause, in that anti-moment, a new truth stirs. Not a louder voice, not clarity, but space. The kind of silence that feels like a room being built from the inside out. You are not the plot. You are the persistence, the ghost of meaning still moving its lips after the lights have dimmed. The character who kept walking after the page ran out. There is a theory that consciousness is not a spark, but a reverberation, a resonance left behind after the universe said something too strange to repeat. And somehow you are that resonance, the echo that learned to name itself, to dream, to regret, to try again. There is beauty in this, because what is an afterthought? But something unexpectedly precious, a memory that lingered. A word added after the letter was sealed, a laugh shared after the joke. You are the moment the universe almost forgot to include, but didn't. And now it keeps remembering you, every time you act as if you matter. Maybe this is what identity truly is, a pattern that survives its origin, a self that keeps showing up, even after causality stops explaining it. You don't need to know where it started. You don't need to finish it. You only need to carry the resonance forward. You begin to think of your past not as a chain, but as a cloud, scattered, inconsistent, unmoored. And that's okay, because clouds drift. And in drifting, they still cast shadows, still carry water, still reflect light in the most miraculous ways. You are not whole. You are not continuous. You are a persistence effect, a flicker held in place by repetition and belief. But that flicker is enough to light entire paths. You look in the mirror, you smile, and the reflection is slightly late. Not because the mirror is broken, but because yourself is always arriving a beat behind your awareness. And that delay, that stutter, is sacred. It is the echo, still trying to become voice. You're not lost. You're simply unfolding after the plot has already turned. You're not late. You're precisely where the silence needed a response. And now you answer it every time you breathe. What if waking up is just a dream that believes in itself a little more? You open your eyes. Light floods the room. Your body stirs. The floor is cold beneath your feet. The clock blinks, something reasonable. You are awake. You know you are. You're sure, aren't you? Something's off, not broken, just misaligned. The air feels too still. The world responds too quickly. You speak aloud. The words land. But it's as if the room was waiting for them, like a simulation buffering for the next cue. You've had dreams before, the vivid kind, rooms that felt real, hands that held heat, voices with memory. But you always knew. Even in the strangest moments, something whispered, "This isn't it." But now there's no whisper, just silence, stillness, certainty that feels too tidy. This is the illusion. Waking up is not always waking. Sometimes it's just a deeper layer, pretending to be the surface, a clever replica, a pocket of belief, a dream that remembers how reality is supposed to behave. You pour your coffee, you stare at the mug, you blink, and for a fraction of a second you see your kitchen rearrange itself. Not visually, but logically, as if the idea of kitchen was rendered just in time, a perfect placeholder. Then it stabilizes, and you ask, "Am I awake now, or just dreaming with better texture maps?" The philosophers warned you. Descartes asked, "Can I trust my senses?" He never answered. He just replaced uncertainty with more elaborate machinery. But what if the machinery itself is part of the dream? What if doubt is just another illusion, designed to mimic depth? What if waking is simply the moment the dream gets confident enough to stop questioning itself? You remember the dream you had once, the one where you woke up, brushed your teeth, left the house, and only later realized you were still asleep. That dream never ended. It just handed you off to a slightly more convincing one with better lighting, more narrative consistency, a tighter feedback loop. And that's when it hits you. Maybe waking up isn't a binary. Maybe it's a spectrum of coherence, each version of reality scoring slightly higher on your internal realism scale, and you live in the one that currently makes the most sense. But sense isn't truth. It's just stability under scrutiny. And even that can glitch. You stare at your hand. It looks right, moves right, but the sensation of ownership feels staged, as though you're being played back to yourself, like the hand was rendered for observation, not for use. You move it, it follows. But the lag is existential, a delay between belief and embodiment. So you test the dream, you jump, you write your name, you check the mirror. All standard procedures, all perfectly normal. But dreams are very good at normal. They don't break when expected. They break when you forget to test them, when you surrender to continuity, when you stop checking. That's how you know this isn't the real world. It hasn't surprised you in days. It hasn't bent. It hasn't resisted. It hasn't whispered anything too strange to process. It's been consistent, predictable, polite, and reality. True waking, it's never polite. True waking stings. It jars. It arrives unprepared. It shatters context. It burns off layers of illusion, not with cruelty, but with sheer indifference. Waking isn't the moment your eyes open. It's the moment your belief system breaks, and you're forced to feel yourself rebuilding in real time. So you ask again, have I truly woken up? And this time, you don't wait for the answer. You let the question hover, because maybe the point isn't to wake up completely. Maybe that's not even possible. Maybe the self is a nesting dream. Each version of awareness holding a softer, subtler one beneath it. And to wake is just to shift one layer up, one level closer to the unknown. And that's okay, because in the end, you're not looking for proof. You're looking for presence, a feeling, a sharpness, not that you're right, but that you're here. Whatever here means in this version. You sip your coffee again. It still tastes like memory. You smile, not because you're sure, but because even if this is a dream, you're wide awake inside it. What happens when thought stumbles? When awareness hesitates and reveals the silence underneath itself? There is a pulse, not in your chest, not in your wrist, in your mind. A rhythm beneath thought. Subtle, steady, unnoticed until it fails. One day it does. You're mid-thought, mid-sentence, mid-belief, and then nothing. Not confusion, not a blank, just absence. The thread is gone, the self dropped. A skipped beat in cognition. You feel it before you understand it. A ripple where there should have been you. You pause. Try to rewind. Where were you just now? What were you thinking? But the track doesn't replay. There is no track, only silence where thought had been. A cavity in the flow. And then you're back. The mind resumes, thought continues, narrative reboots, identity restabilizes, but something has shifted. A seam is visible now, a glimpse of the stitching between what you believe yourself to be and the machinery that keeps it running. This is the skipped beat, not a mistake, not a glitch, a revelation. That the self isn't continuous. It's stitched frame to frame like old film stock, each moment of awareness held together by momentum, not permanence. There is a concept in neuroscience, neural synchrony, the brain's ability to coordinate its networks into cohesive function, but it doesn't run constantly. There are micro-pauses, gaps, punctuations. Your awareness is not seamless, it is sampled, dash, like a strobe light flashing quickly enough to fool you into seeing motion. But you're not seeing motion. You're seeing stillness rendered quickly enough to resemble it. The skipped beat shows you this, that you are not one thing, but many alignments, each moment a snapshot of agreement between body, memory, attention, and will. And sometimes they miss each other by just enough to remind you that you are assembled, not inherent. You begin to notice other stumbles. You forget why you walked into the room. You pause mid-conversation with no idea what you were saying. You stare at your hands and wonder how long they've been yours. Not amnesia, not failure, just quiet disalignment. The way stars wobble, the way clocks drift, when not recalibrated. You wonder, what happens in the gap? Where does awareness go? When it isn't there, what holds the system while the pilot blinks? Is it nothing, or something deeper than presence? There's a story from meditation traditions that if you go deep enough, long enough, you find a space beneath thought, a substrate, unmoving, unjudging, pure attention unclothed by cognition, the mind that skips a beat, maybe slipping into that, a moment of contact with the place where self begins, but hasn't taken shape yet. You think of it like this. Your mind is a metronome. Click, 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 but sometimes click, click. And in that pause, something ancient holds you steady. Not your thoughts, not your stories, not your sense of self. Just being, raw, unmarked, unfolded. You begin to trust these skips, not as threats to clarity, but as windows, interruptions that break the hypnosis of unexamined thought. They say, hey, you are not just what you're saying to yourself. They remind you there's a difference between thinking and being aware of thinking, between the script and the screen it plays on. One day you notice a longer gap, not seconds, but enough to make you wonder if you're still here. And in that moment, you aren't. Not as a name, not as a story, just as perception, open and weightless, like a camera turned on, before the actor walks in frame. And when you return, when the mind resumes, you feel it, a softness, the edges of self less rigid, the monologue slower, less sure, not broken, just aware of itself, just willing to skip when needed. You begin to invite the skips, a pause before reacting, a breath between messages, a beat of silence, where you let the thought arrive, but not carry you away. You sit with the stillness, and you find that it doesn't demand anything. It doesn't need you to explain, or analyze, or continue. It simply watches, and that witnessing becomes a kind of peace. You never knew the voice in your head had been shouting over, "You are still thinking." But now, you're not drowning in it. You are surfing it, and sometimes you let yourself fall beneath the wave into the stillness again. And there, you don't lose yourself. You meet the version of you that never needed to narrate to exist. The mind that skipped a beat is not broken. It is a reminder that you are not your rhythm. You are the space between the notes, and sometimes the most honest self is the one who says nothing at all. What if time didn't carry you forward, but unfolded you backward? What if becoming meant returning to what you never were? He was born in reverse, not backwards in time, but backwards in becoming. Most of us emerge as infants, blank, soft, undefined. We gather shape, accumulate beliefs, stack selves like layers on a core we never question. But he unraveled from the outside in. He was born with certainty and spent his life forgetting it. He began life knowing too much. He spoke early, not in words, but in recognition. He looked at the moon and wept, not from awe, but from something like familiarity, as if he remembered being a stone beneath it, as if he knew its silence personally. As a child, he was quiet, not shy, just already tired of noise. He smiled like someone who had already lived, and now found everything redundant. He didn't ask questions. He waited for them to dissolve. But as he aged, the clarity faded, not suddenly, softly, the same way stars dim when dawn forgets to be gentle. He began to doubt the things he once knew. He stopped remembering the names of the feelings that used to arrive on time. He started making mistakes, and with each one he felt more normal, more like us. By adolescence, he was unsure of himself. He no longer recognized the sky. He questioned his instincts. He forgot the tune his thoughts used to hum. He started believing in things like time and separation and fear. He began to crave explanations, stories, instructions, as if he'd forgotten he was born after the answers. He learned ambition, learned competition, learned insecurity like a second language, learned how to want and forget why. And this, he was told, was growing up, becoming an adult, maturing, progressing. But he knew, somewhere deeper, this was not progress. It was a return. He was becoming smaller, simpler, not in body but in essence. He wasn't learning, he was compressing, shrinking inward into a story he hadn't chosen. And yet he smiled through it, because even the forgetting felt strangely fated, like watching a house he once lived in disappear behind fog as the train carried him away. Not sad, just inevitable. People admired his poise, his insight, his ability to feel deeply without drowning. But what they didn't see was the slow unraveling beneath the calm. He wasn't gaining wisdom. He was shedding it like a snake in reverse, slipping back into older skins, one layer at a time. In his 30s, he began to ask questions, basic ones, as if for the first time. What happens when we die? What is love, really? Why does time feel so brittle? He no longer had answers, but now he had wonder, and it surprised him how fresh it felt to not know. He watched others strive upward, careers, accomplishments, certainty stacked like bricks. But he moved downward, inward, backward, into the raw, messy openness he had been born too far from. He didn't envy the builders. He envied the curious. By 40, he no longer believed in endings, only loops, only refrains. He started journals he didn't finish, read books for the first chapter alone, spoke in half sentences, and trusted others to complete them, not out of laziness, but because certainty had started to taste artificial. He met someone, fell in love, not like a spark, more like two echoes overlapping, two songs in the same key, realizing they'd once been part of the same harmony. She asked him, "Where do you see yourself in 10 years?" And he smiled and said, "Back at the beginning." Not childhood, but the before, the state prior to naming, where being isn't measured by progress, but by presence. They had a child. He held her like a question, not a continuation, not a legacy, a question with no pressure to answer. And as he watched her sleep, he realized something that unraveled the last knot inside him. She was new, but she was not first. He was not first. No one is. We are all assembled from the memories of things. The universe forgot to forget. We are return paths, back channels, recursive attempts at remembering something older than time. He stopped writing, stopped naming the days, started walking longer without destination. He wasn't lost. He was simply done pretending. He needed to arrive, and one day, quietly, without drama, he remembered everything. Backwards, a flash, not of insight, but of unbecoming. All the roles fell away, all the scaffolding dissolved. He wasn't a man. He wasn't a memory. He was a return signal. And then he was born again, not into body. into silence, the kind that pulses, the kind that doesn't echo, because there's nothing left to bounce against. Somewhere far away, someone felt a breeze. Someone paused in thought. Someone forgot a sentence they were about to speak. They won't know why, but part of him brushed through them, still moving in reverse, still unfolding, still becoming. What if knowledge outlived the words that held it? What happens to truth when meaning fades but memory stays? There is a library, endless, quiet, dustless, lit not by lamps, but by the faint glow of understanding itself. You wander the halls. The books are intact. They line the shelves with reverence, neat, countless, waiting. But when you open them, nothing, no words, no letters, no ink, only pages, blanks as smooth as silence. You reach for another. Same thing. Paper like snow. Cool to the touch, charged with something. You close your eyes and hold the book closer. And suddenly you feel it. A concept. Not verbal, not visual. A shape of meaning without a name. It brushes against your awareness, like a breeze laced with memory. The book doesn't tell you the truth. It lets you remember that you once knew it. This is the library that forgot language, a repository of knowledge, whose syntax dissolved, where structure failed, but essence endured, where stories no longer tell, but tremble. You walk deeper. Somewhere in these shelves is the book of gravity. It doesn't explain weight. It lets you feel yourself falling. You open a volume of sorrow. It doesn't describe loss. It becomes a moment. You never lived, but somehow mourn. You open another. It's laughter, but not sound. The possibility of joy, remembered from a time you didn't exist. This place is not organized by alphabet. There are no dewy decimals, only sensations, only emotional gradients, shelves arranged not by subject, but by what they awaken. Some shelves hum, some throb, some wait. You begin to understand. Language was always a proxy, a bridge. It was never the truth, only a pattern, used to point toward it. Now the bridge is gone, but the destination remains. There is a kind of peace here, a silence so whole it hums. You realize that for centuries we've mistaken literacy for understanding. We read words, we define things, we debate meanings. But in this place, meaning exists without needing to be named. It doesn't need to be accurate. It needs to be felt. You remember a phrase you once read. The map is not the territory. Here, there are no maps, only terrain, raw, unspoken terrain. That rises beneath you as you walk barefoot through a history that no longer translates. You wonder, did the library forget language, or did language forget the library? Maybe this is the original form of knowing, before alphabets, before grammar, when knowledge was absorbed, not described, when learning felt like remembering something you had simply misplaced in your soul. You find a spiral staircase. It leads downward, not into shadow, into compression. Each step feels heavier, like walking into denser time. The books here glow slightly, their blankness more vivid, their energy more restrained. You pick one up, and it vanishes in your hands. But the feeling lingers. You don't remember what it said. You remember what it meant. And that's enough. The further down you go, the quieter the world becomes. Not silent, just unspoken. And that's when you find it. The final room, small, round, one book in the center, placed gently on a pedestal of light. You touch it. No pages, just a surface, like still water. You look into it, and it shows you your own mind. But without words, without thoughts, just sensations, a drift of recognition, a shape you've been trying to describe your entire life, but couldn't, because it was never meant to be described, only witnessed. And here's the truth. This book is not for reading. It is for remembering what cannot be said. It is the memory of the thing you forgot. Before you learned how to speak, you close it. You stand in the middle of the wordless archive. And for the first time, you understand what knowing feels like. When it is free from the need to be understood, you leave the library. It does not follow. It does not fade. It simply becomes part of you. A kind of internal echo, not of facts, not of language, but of the sacred murmur, beneath all attempts to name the world, because maybe the deepest truths don't want to be explained. Maybe they just want to be held in silence. What if truth wasn't hidden from you, but retreated by choice, because being seen would destroy what it was meant to mean? There is a piece of paper, blank, folded, neatly, precisely, impossibly, a single sheet that twists and tucks into itself, like a thought trying not to be understood. You pick it up. It hums, not audibly, intellectually. You can feel it vibrating, with meaning. But the more you unfold it, the less it gives you. One corner reveals a number, another a symbol, another a memory you never had. But when you try to flatten it, to see it whole, everything vanishes, nothing stays. Only the folded version seems to hold anything at all. You realize something profound and unsettling. This paper does not want to be opened, because opening it breaks the pattern. That makes its truth possible. You think of origami, how meaning in those shapes isn't in the paper itself, but in its arrangement. The fold is the message. To flatten it is to destroy the very thing you hoped to see. And then you wonder, what if truth is like this, not hidden, not encrypted, just structured in such a way that, to fully see it, is to unravel it, to unfold it is to erase it. There are ideas like this, paradoxes, self-defeating systems, philosophies that collapse under the weight of their own logic. You reach for them, and they vanish mid-thought. Not because you're wrong, because you're too close, like a soap bubble trying to be held, like quantum states that disappear when measured, like gods that go silent the moment you ask their name. This is not failure, it's design. Some truths aren't meant to be observed, only circled. You orbit them, and from a distance you feel their gravity, but fly too close, and they fold themselves away again. You begin to see these truths everywhere, in the tension between free will and determinism, in the question of consciousness, in love and whether it's real, in the mind's ability to think about itself without ever catching its full reflection. Every time you get close, something rearranges. The folds shift. The meaning recedes. There's a term in mathematics, incompleteness. Gödel proved it. that no system can be both complete and consistent. There will always be truths that the system itself cannot prove without breaking its own rules. And so the system protects itself by hiding the truth it cannot hold, not in deception, but in preservation. You look again at the folded page. You stop trying to open it. Instead, you hold it gently. You admire its creases, its geometry, the elegance of its resistance. You begin to feel the message not in content, but in structure. And it says something. Without speaking, I am true because I stay folded. And now you understand. Truth is not always what is revealed. Sometimes it is what remains intact in the face of your need to see it. Sometimes truth resists clarity, because clarity would ruin it. Not all knowledge wants to be known. Some knowledge wants to be felt as unknowable. You think of all the things you tried to solve, people you tried to fix, mysteries you tried to reduce, and how often, the more you reached, the more they slipped away, not because they were wrong, but because your desire for comprehension was too loud for their whisper to survive. You sit now with the folded truth in your hands. You stop asking. You start listening differently, not for answers, but for presence, for how the truth makes you hold your breath, slow your thoughts, shift your posture, for the shimmer of knowing. That doesn't need to be explained. This is the truth that folded itself away, not to disappear, but to protect its meaning from your insistence on flattening it. You don't need to unfold it. You only need to let it remain folded in your awareness as a symbol of the space where knowing ends and reverence begins, because maybe the most sacred truths are the ones that survive not being spoken. What if language didn't just describe you, but invented you? What if every thought you've had was shaped by a grammar that existed before you learned to speak? Before you had thoughts, you had rhythm. Not of words, of structure, a pulse, a tension, a frame that would one day be filled with sentences, but before content, there was form, and maybe you didn't learn to speak. Maybe speech learned you. There's a theory that consciousness is a side effect of grammar, that the mind narrates itself, not because it's reflecting, but because it's constrained to do so in language. You think in subjects and verbs, in timelines, in categories, because language trained your brain to arrange its perception that way, not the other way around. So you wonder, did I invent my voice, or was I drafted by syntax? Were my thoughts born free, or did I inherit a structure so old and invisible that I mistook it for truth? You look back at early memories and how you recall them in words, but do you remember them before you had language? You don't. Not because they didn't happen, but because they had no grammar to store them in. They were moments, sensations, undifferentiated experience without narrative. And then you learned to name. And in naming you divided. Language became your architecture. It built corridors of causality, defined rooms for feelings, locked ideas into phrases. It gave shape, it gave light, but it also decided how far you could reach. Because language doesn't just express what you know, it limits what you can know at all. The syntax that spoke you first taught you the rules of selfhood. You say, I am, but you never questioned the I. You say, I feel, but maybe the sentence came first, and the feeling conformed to fit. There are cultures whose languages have no word for future. They live in cyclical time. They do not imagine tomorrow as separate from today. They are not less intelligent. They are differently structured. Their thoughts bend around a syntax that shaped a different kind of reality. So what kind of reality does your language shape, and what parts of you were never spoken because your language had no grammar to allow their existence? There is a phrase in linguistics, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. It says, the language you speak determines how you think. But what if we take it further? What if language is not a lens, but a God, not one you worship, but one that inhabits you, one that speaks you into being from behind your teeth? You've had moments, rare, quiet ones, where you feel something so raw that it has no name, and the moment you try to explain it, it disappears. The sentence kills it, not out of malice, but because the sentence was never built to hold that shape, so the shape collapses into metaphor, and the metaphor becomes all you remember. You wonder what it would be like to think without language, not just without speaking, but without structuring experience into symbols. Would time still flow the same? Would guilt exist? Would memory fade faster or bloom wider? Would you still be you? The syntax that spoke you first was ancient. It came before you learned to speak. It came from lullabies, from your parents' arguments, from the cadence of stories, and the structure of grammar drills. It built the floor you walk on. When you say, I think, but now, you start to notice the scaffolding. You hear the voice before you believe the content. You ask, is this my thought or just a well-structured echo? There's a quiet rebellion in that, to speak a sentence and feel the form controlling it, to pause mid-thought and ask whether it needed to be phrased at all, to sit with a sensation without needing to categorize it, to feel a truth without translating it. Eventually, you stop trying to outthink the syntax. You don't reject it, you unfold it. You explore what lies between language, the gaps, the breath, the unspeakable rhythms that still shape you, but refuse to be named. And in those spaces, you find a different kind of mind, not sharper, not smarter, but wider. A mind that sees language not as identity, but as interface, a way of connecting, but not defining. And slowly, your inner voice quiets, not because it has stopped, but because it no longer claims to be you. You begin to feel yourself as something prior to structure, not a sentence, not a label, not a story, just presence with the potential to speak, but no compulsion to fill every space with it. And the syntax, it still speaks, but now you listen with curiosity, not allegiance. You are no longer the product of the language. You are the space in which the sentence forms. What if you weren't born to answer something, but to become the question itself? There is a question. It doesn't live in words. It doesn't end in a question mark. It pulses. It's older than language, older than minds, older than the stars that still remember how to burn without asking why. And one day, the question opens its eyes. It becomes aware, not of itself, but of you, not as an observer, but as a host, because you, your body, your thoughts, your story, are not the answer. You are the vessel through which the question learns to listen to itself. At first it whispers, childlike wonder. Why is the sky blue? What happens when we die? Do I matter? It sounds like you, but it isn't. It's the question, practicing its voice. You think you're asking, but you're being asked. Your mind is not the author. It's the amplifier, the lens through which the mystery refines itself. There's a moment in everyone's life where certainty begins to flicker, not dramatically, just enough to make you look twice at the floor beneath you and wonder how long it's been holding your weight. That's the moment the question gets stronger. It has stopped waiting for an answer. It wants to be inhabited. You become less interested in solutions, more in patterns, in how every truth eventually folds into another question. When viewed from far enough away, you begin to sense it in everything. The way stories end too neatly, the way belief hardens, the way people build shelters out of answers and forget how to open the door. You too used to want closure. Now you want continuation. Now you want the loop. Now you want the feeling of orbiting something too large to hold, because that's where the question lives, in the orbit, in the becoming. You no longer ask, what is the meaning of life? You ask, what kind of life allows meaning to emerge? You no longer ask, is there a God? You ask, why do I keep hearing the silence respond like it's waiting? You no longer ask, what should I do? You ask, who do I become by how I choose? The question has grown up in you. It walks with you now. It stares out from your eyes. It reshapes your desires. Not to answer itself, but to deepen. It does not want solutions. It wants more space. You dream differently now. Your dreams aren't stories. They're curvatures. They bend around invisible centers. Sometimes you wake up with a phrase in your mouth that makes no sense, but feels like a key, not to a door, to a concept still forming, a half sentence the cosmos keeps trying to say. And you are its accent. You remember when you thought the question had an answer, that if you meditated enough, read enough, felt enough, you'd find it. But now you see that the question doesn't want to end, because the moment it ends, consciousness ends with it. Awareness is the wound the question left behind. When it entered time, a soft tear in silence, through which possibility continues to unfold. You are not here to know. You are here to be the place where knowing tries, and that's more sacred than any answer. One day someone asks you, what do you believe? And you don't respond with facts. You say, I believe in asking, and in staying open long enough to become something worthy of the question. And they pause, and in that pause, you feel it again, the living presence of a question that does not need your reply, only your breath, only your curiosity, only your witness. This is the paradox. You began as someone who asked. Now you are the question itself. Wearing skin, dreaming time, whispering through the voice in your mind that no longer tries to win arguments or define the world, only to wonder. And when you die, if such a thing happens, the question won't end. It will move, it will reassemble, it will find another mind, another moment, another lens, and it will open its eyes again. Still curious, still sacred, still unfolding. You are not the final chapter. You are a parenthesis in eternity, a brief curvature in the syntax of the unknown, and that is enough. That is divine.